Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. This is Kyle, your host, and you know the drill. Before we're going to get into it, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Lessonly. If you've been listening, you know they're sponsoring this whole show, lessonly.com. Best training software for sales and customer service teams, hands down. I might be a little biased, but that's okay. They're still great. Whether you're practicing, coaching, what else? Onboarding, thousands to 10 employees, up to 1,000 employees, up to 20,000 employees, up to 200,000 employees. They're going to do it for you. All right. Check them out at lessonly.com. Today's episode is a good friend. Today's guest is a good friend, VP of Marketing at Searchspring, fellow evangelical college survivor like myself, Joann Martin. Great individual, great marketer, great leader, has some great thoughts on how you should be strengthening yourself as an individual, and then some stories about what happened when she was traveling overseas. Where's her place to visit? So I really hope you enjoy it. Right, cheers. Everyone, welcome to the Revenue Diaries. It's a deeply personal interview series where we ask the top marketing and sales leaders in the world 5 questions about their work, fears, family, and life. There's just one catch. We don't share any of the questions in advance. So Joann has no idea what I'm going to ask her. She's very excited. Joann, why don't you go ahead? Welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Joann Martin. I'm VP of Marketing at Searchspring, a search and merchandise provider for e-commerce companies. I live and breathe SaaS. That has been my career and will be the career for the rest of my life. So I'm super excited and a little bit nervous to get into this interview. But I love the premise. So ask away.
Joann did not receive the questions ahead of time. You feel okay? Not. You feel good?
I feel good.
Okay. So we're going to start with an easy question. Easy question first. This is a softball question.
Okay.
You and I both attended private evangelical colleges. It also looks like we both may have dabbled in the evangelical faith.
Mm-hmm.
How would you categorize your belief system now? Has it changed since the uncomplicated days of Liberty University?
The softball, huh? I'm super excited to hear the following questions. We're going to open with religious existential crises, and then we'll just make it harder from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. How would I describe my religious faith now? I would say that I am very spiritual and very interested in spirituality. I love discussing spirituality and exploring it with people. I wouldn't call myself an evangelical Christian now. This podcast is not 7 hours long, but maybe we could get into that on your long format podcast at some point, where we discuss religion and philosophy and in-depth midlife crises in everyone's lives. I don't know if that fully answers your question. How have things changed?
Yeah, I mean, your belief systems change, and it's the same with me. I mean, you grew up evangelical Christian, or at least, at some point in your life you were, and it shifted to a more spiritual nature than necessarily a religion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the case for a lot of people that I meet. Who grow up in the Christian church or even in another religious environment. And you can start to explore what that means in your life. You start to experience life differently than the way you're taught it's supposed to be, or experience humanity in a different way. And it makes you question those things. For me, a lot of it was just traveling internationally and being exposed to a lot of different ways of thinking. And understanding that a lot of people are really just seeking to understand why things are the way they are. There are a lot of different cultural and religious paths that people take to get there. And that's what fascinates me about religion, is how people explore it and use it as a foundation for their lives. It gives them a structure, and myself as well. It gives me a structure to understand the way the world works. Unfortunately, the world is not super predictable, so it doesn't always stand up to rigid structures.
Well, you
as
mentioned,
we're learning in 2020.
yes, absolutely. This is probably the best year to show that.
Right.
You mentioned traveling, which you
Yeah.
spent quite a bit of time in the nonprofit space, volunteering. I want to talk about first what you learned while traveling. What were your favorite spots you traveled to? And then my second question is, what made you switch to evil capitalism?
Okay, first question. What did I learn while traveling? So much. I don't think I could ever categorize all of it. I learned how much I enjoy being in a country where I don't understand what anyone is saying. It's the thing I miss the most about traveling, is being on a subway, and it's to someone who doesn't speak the language everyone around is used to speaking, it's like white noise, which is somehow comforting for me. I miss exploring just completely new food, new ways of thinking. One of my favorite parts of traveling, and the thing that I learned, but kind of by experience, was hospitality. And when you travel internationally, and especially in places, because I was in a nonprofit organization, we didn't travel like tourists might travel. And so you rely a lot on the hospitality of the people that you're working with. And so I learned a lot about how true hospitality is very egoless. I think a lot of times in my life, or in the even West, or in the US or Europe, we think of hospitality as a show or a display. But the thing that I picked up the most is that it is effectively just dropping all of the premise behind the hospitality and saying, I don't care that my room's a mess. You can have my bed. Like, I don't care that I didn't go to the grocery store today. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. And so I've tried to incorporate that in my life a lot. My favorite place, your second question.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way I could pick a favorite. There are things that stand out about every single place I've been. I could give you a couple of moments that were my favorite. One favorite for sure was Ukraine. We're in southern Ukraine, and there's a place on the coast, and we were just on a day off. We went to the beach, and there are ruins along the coastline, but you have to swim out probably 100 yards to where you're standing on the edge of what used to be an old fort. And just standing out there, and the waves are crashing over. And from the shore, it looks like you're just walking on the water, to go back to our religious conversation.
Yeah.
But it was such an epic feeling to be in a very historical context, but just be totally overwhelmed by how big everything can be and how small you can feel. So Ukraine is a big one. I also absolutely loved Taiwan, and I would go back in a second. The culture there is just incredible. The people are amazing, so warm and so happy. So those are two of my favorites, but I could tell stories all day.
Well, so before we get to evil capitalism,
yeah,
shift, what did you learn? What did you take away from your travels around hospitality, egoless living, everything you mentioned, and how it applies to the way you view marketing or approach scaling a software company?
Wow, that's a big one. When you think about being egoless, and that's the biggest thing I can tie into how I approach leadership in general, which is scaling a SaaS company. It's really not a big deal to admit that you don't know everything. And if you think about your team as a group of people that's there to be successful with you, dropping the ego is probably the most productive thing you can do as a leader. And I learn a lot of our CTO at Searchspring. I consider him a lot of a cultural mentor or leadership mentor. And he always says, like, the gap between you and your team should be constantly lessening, not widening, in terms of how they see you as someone they collaborate with. So it's not that you're growing as a leader and you're leaving them behind. It's that you're getting closer and closer to them in how you build trust, so that any project you're working on, you're all rolling up your sleeves and getting it done. And yeah, maybe your function as a leader is to direct or guide or share information, but it doesn't mean that you're somehow above. And so I bring a lot of, I try to bring a lot of humility into how I approach business and how I approach scaling a software company. I don't know all the answers. I also, when I think about marketing too, a lot of marketers like to list out a lot of differentiators, and you can put blinders on and believe you're better than everyone else, all of your competitors. And of course that's true with Searchspring, but
of course
any other, no, but to have that level of humility when you look at even a market, to be really realistic about how you think about where you are in that market and to really capitalize on the strengths, as opposed to putting the ego blinders on and saying we're flat out the best at everything, can actually help you have a much more refined message, getting into the nitty gritty of the marketing.
Sure.
So
sure.
Those are the main ways I think you incorporate humility into leadership.
And did you learn that traveling, or is this just something you learned because you were raised correctly and you have a good head on your shoulders? I mean, I'm sure it's
you'd have to ask my mom. I'm sure she'd take credit for it.
Okay, so
the way you're raised can open you up to learning things in any experience in your life.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what made you turn over a new leaf and move over to evil capitalism from the nonprofit world?
I don't think capitalism is evil. I think
I clearly do not either.
It's funny because I actually have had this debate with people, and typically people who are very idealistic, and there's a lot of this binary concept of either like you are solving world hunger and you're the good guy, or you're not and your work is meaningless. And I think that's a very elementary way of looking at life.
Yeah.
And so when I was in the nonprofit space and looked at going into, as you call it, evil capitalism, I didn't see it as getting out of doing work that's meaningful and going into just getting a better paycheck. I thought about it as, how can I best contribute to the world? And a lot of what we did in the work that I did at the nonprofit required significant fundraising. And the people who made the most difference, and the people that I saw making the most difference even outside of our organization, were the ones funding things. And so that was the first nudge for me that pushed me over into evil capitalism. Was my strengths are better suited in a for-profit space, but then I can take my platform or take my financial resources or my time, my experience, and then send it back to other causes that I do find meaningful. That being said, there's so much meaning for me in being able to work with my team that I like. Coaching, mentoring, teaching, inspiring, all of those things are incredibly meaningful to me. So I don't think that I could draw it out as black and white as good and evil.
That's good. That's a good answer. Okay, so moving a different direction here. You stated on a recent interview, there is enough boring PR/storytelling out there. PR that doesn't have personality or narrative, doesn't consider the reader. It just checks the box. Weaving a story in your PR and marketing creates a more personal and entertaining story for readers. So PR aside, I personally believe there are too many revenue leaders out there that are the same way. They just check the box, they fail to tell a story. And I believe that all marketing and sales leaders should be great at storytelling. By the way, check out Joann's LinkedIn bio, because it's pretty much the best bio
thank you.
in my entire life. But what do you think? Should we all be really good at it, or is it okay to have marketing and sales leaders that are terrible at storytelling?
I think it's okay to be bad at storytelling. You're not going to be very good at your job. It makes a little bit of space for the rest of us.
That's fair.
But if
So,
you're maybe let's put it this way. Maybe you're a sales leader and you're not great at storytelling, but your marketing counterpoint is an absolute rock star, or counterpart is an absolute rock star.
yeah.
And maybe as a sales leader bad at storytelling, you are really, really good at coaching a sales team or identifying new markets that you want to enter. And maybe your marketing leader is not so great at those things. And if you collaborate well, then it's okay. I think you've covered your bases in terms of being able to function as a team. I don't think everyone, like, so I can't remember who said it recently, but someone recently said you can only be great at two things. With the way that the speed of my life is right now, I fully agree with that. I feel like any given day, like I'm either a good mom, good at cooking breakfast, or good at telling stories. I can't be good at all of them at the same time. You have to rely on the other people.
Love that. Great answer. All right, bonus question for all the practitioners listening, watching. What's your best advice to marketing leaders, sales leaders who are in this crazy world with us of scaling a SaaS company?
It's gonna be okay.
Life will not end.
Life will not end. There will always be more work. So turn it off and spend some time with your family at the end of the day. There will always be another project. There will always be another deal to close. So I think the main advice I would give is set boundaries early and often, so that you're energized and fulfilled and you're able to move your business forward. Mm-hmm. If you're not doing it, you're not, even in the best of times, which we're clearly not in right now, like that is absolute recipe for burning out. And you see so many revenue leaders hit that wall where they just can't move forward because they didn't set boundaries.
Oh, I love it. This has been awesome, Joann. Thank you. Could you tell the fine folks listening and watching where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at the corner of Soledad and Houston and San Antonio, or online. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can search Joann Martin. That's also my profile URL. I have no other social media profiles in true fact.
That's right. I couldn't find you. I couldn't find you on Twitter. And you were like,
I'm a ghost.
I don't use it. That's good.
Yeah, right. Or you can find Searchspring at searchspring.com.
Awesome. Thanks for coming by. That wraps up another episode of the Revenue Diaries. I'm not Joe Rogan. So if you like this episode, or, if you love Joann, go rate, subscribe, download, share, review. You know the drill. Thanks for listening and watching.